Hey guys, Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer, where we talk about all things music. And today, we're going to be starting a new series. This is if tarot cards were albums. Basically, for this series, I'm going to be taking every tarot card, all 78 of them, and choosing 10 albums based on their meaning. Today, we're looking at the Fool, which is the first tarot card. Now, just to clarify, these are not albums about fools. These are albums that remind me of the meaning of each tarot card. And the Fool's meaning is adventurous, curious, innocent, and wanting or starting something new, basically. Because it's the first tarot card, so it's like a child. So, I have to find albums that fit that. Before we get started, let me state a few rules. 1. Only one album per artist. 2. These albums are in no particular order. So, with that out of the way, leave any other albums that you think fit my criteria in the comment section below, and there will be a link to a list on Rate Your Music that gave me the idea for this series that kind of explains my criteria a little bit more. So, now that that's over with, let's get started with the first album. An obvious one. Number 1. Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles. Any of the Beatles' late period albums could have fit for this. Their music is happy, cutesy, and almost sounds like children's music. They were super adventurous and experimental with their sound. And they started all kinds of new things. So, with that in mind, why did I pick Magical Mystery Tour over, say, Yellow Submarine or Abbey Road, which have actual children's songs on them? Well, one reason. This album has a song called The Fool on the Hill, and the tarot card we're doing is The Fool. I couldn't resist. Anyway, Magical Mystery Tour fits all of the criteria I just listed. From the adventurous backwards instrumentation of Baby You're a Rich Man, to the childlike whimsy of I Am the Walrus, to the extreme happiness of All You Need Is Love. Also, even the title and the cover art sound kind of The Fool-like. Like, seriously. Magical Mystery Tour sounds like something you'd go on at Disneyland or something. This whole thing just screams childlike whimsy, and is pretty adventurous as well. In other words, it is the perfect album for this list. And a great album in general as well. Now for something a bit less obvious. Number 2! Pemu Revolution by Chiari Pemu. Yup, we just went from 60s psychedelic pop to 2010s J-pop. Strap in, folks, it only gets wackier from here. Anyway, I don't know much about J-pop outside of this album. I know it's Japanese pop, I know this album is a part of it, but I don't know pretty much anything else outside of that. However, I may have to check out more of this because this album is pure, stupid fun. As for how this relates to The Fool, well, it mostly relates to the childlike aspects of it. This album literally has a song that goes, candy, 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 gummy. And also, Kiari Pemiu Pemiu, whose name I'm probably butchering, is doing this innocent little kawaii voice that reminds me more than a little bit of Pikachu. And let's not forget that the music itself is pure innocent bliss. Another reason I thought this album fit well with The Fool is the music videos. Yes, I know, this doesn't have anything to do with the actual music, but considering Kiari Pemiu Pemiu was referred to as Japan's Lady Gaga back when Lady Gaga was still wearing meat dresses and making surrealist music videos, I think they deserve a mention. These videos are definitely experimental and adventurous, even if the music itself really isn't. Check out the videos for Pon 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 and Candy Candy in particular. Those are weird. And watch the videos along with listening to the music, and you will be amazed at how weird and just out there it is. Anyway, that dragged me out of my wheelhouse a little bit. Now, let's talk about something a bit more in my comfort zone. Symphonic metal! I am so predictable. Number 3, Circus Black by Empyrean Dawn. When I was writing my script for this, I realized I could have included Imaginarum by Nightwish in this slot instead. However, I like shining a light on a lesser-known band. So, Empyrean Dawn. These guys are a Finnish symphonic metal band fronted by Heidi Parviainen, I'm probably butchering that, who would later go on to front another symphonic metal band called Dark Sarah. This album is the last one that they did with Heidi as vocalist. And this fits with The Fool because The Fool is all about having or wanting something new. And Empyrean Dawn were definitely wanting something new considering they replaced Heidi only a year after this album came out. And if this were the only connection to The Fool, however, I wouldn't have even chosen this album, so let's talk about the other connections. I also chose this particular album because of all the fairy tale retellings in the lyrics, such as Crimson Flower, which is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And even some of the darker songs like Circus Black and my personal favorite, Charnel's Ball, could easily be turned into creepy kids' movies. Think The Nightmare Before Christmas, or some of those stop-motion ones from that company called Leica, or Leica, however you say that, like Coraline, Paranorman, The Box Trolls, something like that. It also helps that this album does take a few unexpected turns. For example, Charnel's Ball is basically just a classical piece that happens to contain an electric guitar solo, and Circus Black makes use of creepy circus music. Like, it's not super adventurous or anything, but for what it is, it can have elements at times. Because of this, and everything else I just mentioned, it deserves to be here. Now, let's move on to something a bit less serious in tone. Number 4, Aura Drag by Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. familiar with this band weren't expecting this. A punk band doing covers of songs from Grease, The Muppets, and The Sound of Music? What's this? It's Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, of course. These guys are a punk band known for doing punk covers of non-punk songs. They do covers of all kinds of songs, but this album is dedicated entirely to doing punk covers of show tunes from various musicals. The main reason this relates to The Fool is just how unique and unexpected this concept is. Name me one other punk band that has done a cover of Favorite Things from The Sound of Music. It also helps that this particular album contains a cover of a literal children's song, that being Rainbow Connection by Kermit the Frog. Which, yeah, there's the childlike whimsy of this album. What surprises me most about these covers is just how good they are. Like, I could see some punk bands doing a cover of Rainbow Connection or Favorite Things badly as a joke, but to hear them done good and with a completely straight face, yeah, that's a bit unexpected. Also, now that we've got a reprieve from the darker side of childhood innocence, let's go back to that with something even darker. Number 5! The Greatest Show on Earth by Creature Feature. This album falls into a genre called dark cabaret. It's basically just creepy cabaret or sometimes vaudeville or circus music. And it's usually Halloween themed. And considering how many children celebrate Halloween, yeah, I think this works. Especially since I could easily see some of the songs on this album being used for those creepy kids movies I used while talking about Amberian Dawn. Also, the song A Gory Demise is literally about a creepy children's book. Like, it's inspired by The Gashly Crumb Tinies by Edward Gorey, which is basically one of those alphabet books that you buy for 4-year-olds, except a lot gorier. And that's not even the only reference to childhood fears in this album. There's also a song about a dark carnival, the greatest show on earth, a song about a psychopathic child, such horrible things, and a song about every morbid preteen's favorite author, Edgar Allan Poe, titled Buried Alive. It's also pretty adventurous, but in a different way than, say, Me First and the Gimme Gimmes or the Beatles. It's adventurous in the sense that most of these songs are based on books or movies, which are like mini adventures, basically. Like, aside from Edward Gorey and Edgar Allan Poe, this album also has a title track based on Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, and also a song called The Meek Shall Inherit the Earth, which is based on the black and white horror movie Them. In other words, this is probably the darkest album on here, but I still think it deserves a spot on this list. Now, back to the more lighthearted stuff. Number 6, Back Through Time by Alestorm. Wow, we're just dealing with all kinds of unexpected themes today. First we have a punk album that deals with doing covers of show tunes. And now we have a metal album that's all about pirates? Now, to be fair, Alestorm are not the first metal band to make songs about pirates. That award goes to Running Wild. However, what made me put Alestorm on this list instead of Running Wild is that Running Wild took the whole pirate thing way too seriously to have any kind of childlike whimsy to it. Alestorm, on the other hand, is more goofy and fun. More Pirates of the Caribbean-ish, if you will. I chose this album specifically because it represents Alestorm starting something new. This is the first album where they weren't doing the Running Wild thing of taking themselves super seriously. And since the Fool also represents starting something new, I figured it fit. Also, the pirate theme fits the adventurous part of this particular tarot card perfectly. In other words, it's a perfect album for this list. Now, let's move on to something completely different. Number 7, Caps On, Hats Off by Boss Fight. Here it is. The only album on this list, aside from Kiari Pemiu Pemiu, that isn't a rock album. Specifically, this album falls into a genre of electronic music called chiptune, aka old school arcade game music. Now, chiptune sounds really good when combined with a style of electronic drum beats called breakbeats, and that's what Boss Fight did here. Anyway, the reason I put this album on here is because back in the 80s to early 90s, when this genre of music was in pretty much every video games were viewed as a children's thing. That fact, combined with how whimsical some of these song titles are, kind of makes it have a bit of childlike whimsy to it. Seriously, look at some of these song titles. Be Gone, Mr. Gone, Steampunk Warlord, and my personal favorite, The Maze of Mayonnaise. They're all extremely weird, not to mention whimsical. It also helps that this album just sounds so happy. Like, it's just so fun. And also adventurous, considering video games are often adventure-themed. And I love this enough that I'm actually starting a series soon where I list 5 albums to get you into insert genre here, and I may have to do one of those on chiptune. Anyway, let's get back to the rock on this list, shall we? Number 8, The Fury of the Aquabats by the Aquabats. Third wave ska is a genre that almost always fits in well with the Fool. It's goofy, silly, whimsical, and happy. And the lyrics tend to be all kinds of silly. Also, the bands tend to have names like Real Big Fish, Mustard Plug, and Skankin' Pickle. Need I say more? That said, I chose the Aquabats specifically because their lead singer, MC Bat Commander, helped create the children's show Yo Gabba Gabba, and also was in his own kids show titled The Aquabats Super Show for a brief period of time. Even ignoring all of that, these guys' entire persona just reminds me so much of the Fool. Like, they have a superhero persona, they all wear masks, and their music is, well, happy, whimsical, and goofy. Seriously, just look at some of these song titles. Magic Chicken, Cat with Two Heads, Captain Hampton and the Midget Pirates. Those are the definition of childlike and weird. Another reason I chose this album for this list is that the superhero persona can be seen as adventurous. It's certainly unique, even if it is a gimmick. In other words, it's a perfect album for this list, and a great album in general. And speaking of bands that have their own lore, number 9, The End of Days by Abney Park. Abney Park falls into a genre of music called steampunk, indeed inspired by the subgenre of literature created by Jules Verne. And like the genre of literature, steampunk music combines newer elements and older elements, with elements of both of rock, electronic, and folk. What makes this work for the fool is that steampunk music tends to be pretty adventurous, both in the sense that most of the stories it's based on are adventure novels, and also in the sense that the music itself is really creative. Like, seriously, Abney Park, I think, are seen as kind of pioneers of steampunk music, and they get pretty creative on here. You could also say that this album represents a new beginning for Abney Park, in the sense that this is where they started establishing a lot of their lore. And it also could be seen as childish a little bit, because steampunk pioneer Jules Verne, while not technically a children's author, I think his stories could be enjoyed by children. I've read some of them. They work as kids' books. In other words, this album fits the fool very well. And now for the last album on this list. Number 10, The Mollusk by Ween. We began this video with a 60s psychedelic rock album, and now we're ending it with a 90s one. This is also the album that made Ween a cult band, and it's musically adventurous and very unique. And because it's the album that made them a cult band, you can say that it was a new beginning for them. And it also started another new beginning. For those of you who don't know, this is the album that inspired SpongeBob SquarePants. No, I'm not kidding. And in fact, the song Ocean Man from this album was actually included on the soundtrack to the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. And even ignoring the SpongeBob connotations here, the lyrics on this thing are just really whimsical. Like, there's a song on here about a whale with a polka dot tail. Need I say more? And also, the music is just really experimental and weird. And that's my list. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'm Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer, and I'm out.